Okay, hi everyone, I'm back. I'm going to discuss chapters 3 and chapter 5 in your textbook. Uh, Chapter 5 focuses on the outline, which is really important to pay attention to, and chapter 3 focuses on how you're going to research. So on slide 6, it talks about the places that you can go and research. You guys already know this. You're smart, you know how to negotiate the internet better than I can, probably. But just to understand that you've got help on the internet and you've got databases from the campus library that you can access remotely through the website. If you don't know how to do that, I can send you a link. If you need help, trying to find research to support your work, I can help you do that too. The only two speeches out of the four that you have to have internet sources for and something that's academic, Wikipedia doesn't count, are the sources that are part of your informative speech and your persuasive speech. And I'll get into that a little bit later. So on slide 7, it talks about the visible web, the things that you can access through search engines, and then obviously websites. But there's all different types of sources that you can have. For your introductory speech, of course, you're the source for yourself. For your demonstration speech, you could be a source, but it also could be something that somebody taught you, or a recipe a grandmom or grandfather passed down, or whatever it would be. So people can be sources. You can interview people. You probably have a lot of people in your life that have a lot of experience, and you could interview them and use them as a source. The biggest part of that is to cite it correctly in terms of citing it during your presentation and then citing it on your in your outline and on your source page. So, with internet sources, you have to check to make sure they're accurate. That's being responsible. You want to try to find sources that are not biased in nature, that show both sides, and something that's current. So, if you're talking about COVID 19 in one of your speeches, you definitely want to look at sources in the news, but sources all across the internet, not just necessarily liberal leaning or left sources, but also conservative sources, and try to find something in the middle. A lot of the times in the work that I do with the students, when we talk about journalism and citing sources, I tell them to go to the BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, because they have less of an agenda because they're not in the United States. So I can help you figure out where to go look to be able to find sources that'll help you support your work and your speeches. So you have Google. I suggest that you use Google Scholar. Um, they're usually just general search engines, and we know Google is one of the top ones, but Google Scholar is better, especially for work that you're going to do in college. You have meta search engines like Dogpile and Excite. You could use those. Um, and then obviously there's web directories on the Google directory. So you've got a lot of places to go. And on the library website section of the college website, you have databases and free access to all of that to do your research. So again, if you don't know where to go, I can help you negotiate it, teach you how to do keywords to search for things, and then um, move on from there. Don't be intimidated that you have to have sources for your speeches. Most people think that you don't, but you do. It's just like writing a paper. Just because you're presenting it doesn't mean that you don't have to back it up with legit information. So there are blogs that you can use as well. This is slide 12. So you definitely want to be able to go on blogs. But of course, blogs most of the time are going to lean one way or the other. In your persuasive speech, if they lean to support your argument, absolutely, but it has to still be based on some type of evidence, statistics, and facts. But a lot of blogs you'll see are one sided and sometimes just opinion, so you got to make sure you're careful of that. There's also personal websites that people create. I know a lot about theater. I could create a website about theater and everything would be legit and it would be accurate, but I'm not necessarily considered an expert in it. I don't have a degree in theater. I have life experience. So even if you found my website, it was a really good resource, you still would need to find something else that would support uh, what I'm saying. And that would be somebody that was, cited as being an expert in that field. So obviously on slide 15, it talks about your library websites. You have Patty Schmidt, who is an excellent resource and is the director of the library there. She will help you, and everybody from the library is online, usually 8:30 to 4:30, to help you. Um, Starting, I believe, the end of next week, May 22nd, the college is closed on Fridays. So I'm not sure if people will be necessarily as accessible. So you should really look at having your work taken care of and kind of your questions answered Monday through Thursday, especially if you're going to use the library. I'm accessible all the time, even on the weekends. But for some of the staff there when the college is closed, even though they're not physically at the college, they still may not be checking their emails regularly. So you've got multiple databases that you can find in the library, journals. A really good place to start is EBSCOhost. Um, and also, there's all different journals that'll help you do general search engines to be able to find things that you are able to find evidence for under keyword search. Again, you have to make sure they're reliable. You have to make sure that you are quoting them correctly and that you're not plagiarizing. And newspapers are also a way to find current information. Again, if I was going to do a speech on COVID, I would definitely be looking in the newspaper and on the newspaper websites because they have the most up-to-date information. You can use videos, you can use audio, you can use podcasts. Everything is really, able to be used. You just have to make sure that you check the source. And if you're uncertain of it, that's when you ask me, and I will, if you can't figure out whether it's legit, I will go in and figure out if it is. You have magazines, newsletters, journals, um, definitely books, textbooks. Your textbook could be used as a source. I've had students that have done speeches about how to give a proper, effective speech, and they've used their textbook as a source. So anything really is on the table for this. Um, you can use government resources. The things that you need to be wary of is really .coms and .nets. They aren't as reliable, or usually they're selling something, especially .com because it's usually for a business. So .gov is government, .edu is education, .com is usually businesses, .net usually are personal websites, and that's something that you definitely for .com and .net have to make sure you're checking your sources. And this really is beyond just this class, it's for your whole college experience. And interview material. You can ask questions and interview a person. I know that we're not supposed to be, meeting up with people, but you can do an interview, email somebody questions. You can have a conference, a video conference. You can get on the phone and talk to them. And then in MLA or APA, whatever you decide to cite this with, in communication, you're supposed to cite APA, but because you probably know MLA better, I'm going to allow you to do that as well. So whatever you're comfortable with when you cite your sources, and I can help you with that too. If you want to learn how to cite with APA, I can teach you, but I will accept MLA. But with that, you just have to make sure that you cite the interview correctly in your works cited page. And let me see if there's anything else. They talk about surveys in the book, but we have 5 weeks. It's quick, 5 or 7 weeks, depending on the class in the summer. And so I'm not going to go into surveys, but you could do a survey to find information out if you were going to survey the class. An example of that is a student did an informative speech about why, excuse me, well, actually a persuasive speech about why it was important for students to register to vote. Their informative speech was how to register, and their persuasive speech was how important it was for them to vote. The reason they decided to do that speech in my class, this was a couple of years ago, was because they realized that only one person in the class besides myself were registered to vote, and that was the person that was asking about giving the speech. So once he found that out, he decided that it was a really important thing for his audience to know about. So he did a little informal survey to figure that out. So we definitely need a list of sources, not in your first two speeches, but in your third and fourth speech. And the checklist on here on slide 36 is the information accurate? Is it current and timely? Is the information complete? Are you missing anything? Will your audience view the information and the source as trustworthy, which is an important question, and is the information suitable for the audience? In some of your speeches, in informative and persuasive, if you are picking a sensitive topic, that's why I'm asking to know your topics in advance, because it is everybody's right, not necessarily because we're not in class, but I do allow if students are uncomfortable with a topic, they're able to step out of the room and not listen. But the people that are presenting absolutely have the freedom to speak about what they want to speak about if it's evidence based and it's appropriate. So in this class, because you won't necessarily be doing it live in front of anybody else but me, it still is important to make sure you consider your audience and what is appropriate to say in front of them. If you're speaking to fifth graders versus middle schoolers versus high school kids and beyond, your message and the words that you use are going to be a little bit different. Okay, and I think that is it. So I'm going to go on to chapter 5. So chapter 5 is super important because it talks about the outline. The first question on the fourth slide is, do you need an, I'm sorry, yeah, on the fourth slide in the fifth chapter of the textbook is, do you need an outline? The answer is yes. Most of the time you'll learn how to write outlines in elementary school, and then you kind of get away from it and you're not supposed to put one together anymore. But for this class, you're going to learn how to write a proper outline, and you're going to follow that outline to be able to give your speech. So it talks about on this fifth slide in chapter 5 about structure. That's what the outline really does give you. It's a way to structure your information, organize it, and have some type of guide to say what you're going to talk about. And so one of your questions in your speech is that. I mean, in your speech quiz in one of the speeches is that. So you want to make sure that you definitely look into that chapter for chapter 5. The parts of the outline are the introduction, the body, and conclusion. Most of you already know that. It's the sections within the introduction, body, and conclusion that you're going to learn in detail in this class. And what does the Roman numeral 1, 2 mean? What does AB mean? What does 1, 2 mean? And I'm going to talk to you about that in this chapter. So once you know what your topic is, your specific purpose is, your central idea is, then we go into what are we going to do? So, and how are we going to organize it? That's where you put your outline. So the first part of your introduction is the first part of your speech is your introduction. There's 4 elements to that. That's attention material, or attention getting device is what I call it. And this is slide 16 in chapter 5. Relevance to audience, credibility, and preview of speech. So if we start from the bottom, your preview of speech should already be done because you wrote it in your central idea. So when you start to create your outline, you can take that central idea once I approve it and you can pop it in to the area of the preview of speech. The first listing is attention to detail. Attention material or attention getting device. That is, how are you going to get your audience's attention? What device are you going to use? Are you going to ask the audience a question? Are you going to start with a quote? Are you going to start lyrics of a song? Are you going to start with some type of statistic that's going to be like, whoa, I didn't know that? What are you going to do to capture their attention and want to make them listen? And then connected to that would be the relevance to the audience. And I always say this is the who cares test. Why would my audience care about what I'm talking about? So in some way, you have to relate this information of why they should care. And the third part of the 4 parts of the introduction is credibility material. In your first and second speeches, you don't really need any. You're going to be the source and the credibility material. But the third and fourth, this is where you would say your sources and the things that you needed to research to be able to find evidence to support what you're talking about. When you have all these things together in your introduction, it provides a really great transition into the body of your main points. The credibility in saying your sources tells your audience that you care, that you looked up information to make sure you provide the most accurate and current information that they have, that you could find in your research. And by doing all that work and having a really great attention getter and relevance, then you wind up really getting the audience to want to listen. And with all the internal and external noise that we talked about prior in the other chapters, you know how much you're fighting against to get people to listen to you. So it's important. Um, the body obviously is the main points of your speech. So in the body of the work, if you have an A, you must have a B. If you have a 1, you must have a 2. So say I'm going to talk about COVID, and I'm going to talk about, my main points are going to be what's happening in the United States, what's happening in New Jersey, and what's happening in Cumberland County. They would be my 3 main points. And under those points, if I'm going to have a sub point 1, I need a sub point 2. And as you look into your outline um, and you get to start putting it together, you'll realize what I'm talking about. It'll be more clear. But in this case, that's pretty much, if you have an A, you need a B. If you have a 1, you need a 2. And every outline isn't going to have 3 main points. It could have 2, it could have 5, and those supporting points could vary as well. But if you do have one, supporting point, you need to have a 2. A, B, 1, 2. Easy. For the conclusion, you have 3 areas: a summary statement, audience response, and a wow statement. The summary statement is basically, well, what did you tell me? What did you tell the audience in a different way that you told it in the beginning? And summarize the main points. Do it a little bit differently than you did it before, but just jog their memory about the things that you discussed. Doesn't have to be long. The wow statement or the audience response can be switched in position. The audience response is, are there any questions? That's as easy as it is. And usually with a live class, people would ask you a question. If you record this in front of people at your home and you do say, are there any questions? And they do ask you a question, answer it. Sometimes the best public speaking that you'll do is responding to your audience when your speech is done. And it's a good way for me to gauge how comfortable you are in that type of setting as well. And the wow statement is what it says. The wow statement is, how am I going to get them to remember what I talked about? Leave them with kind of a final piece that would help them remember the speech. Just because you put something down doesn't mean that it's wow. So you have to make sure when you send me the drafts of your wow statement, your attention getter, that kind of stuff, that I know on your outline that either you're struggling with it, this is what you like to do, but you don't know how to make it that way. That's some of the places that people struggle is, well, how do I make them care in my relevance? What could attention getter be? A wow could be the same thing. Could be lyrics to a song, could be a quote, could be a short video. It could be a lot of different things that support what you're talking about and help you summarize and let the audience leave with remembering your speech. So the format of the outline in your book talks about, full sentence outline. I am asking you to do keyword outline. Again, I don't want you to read the speech. I want you to present it. So a lot of the sections of chapter 5 talk about all of the full sentences, but it also talks about proper citations in your work. Reference the book to be able to know how to do citations, but look at my outline examples on Blackboard so you can see the type of outline I want you to do for your speeches. And I'm trying to think. Oh, transitions. On your outline template that you'll use for speeches 2, 3, and 4, you are going to have somewhere on there between the introduction and the body and the conclusion, something called a link. It's basically a transition from one place to the other. So it talks about transitions on slide 29. For example, let's move on to this topic. Now that we've discussed COVID-19 in the United States, let's move on and talk about COVID-19 in New Jersey. Another example is, we are now ready to discuss in the future, this is what could happen with COVID-19. Meanwhile, later, next. There are a lot of time transitions to get people from one point to another. Obviously, in your writing, you've used to get to a conclusion. In conclusion, you can do that when you get to the conclusion of your speech. So those links are just phrases or sentences that get you from one section of your outline to another. Connecting transitions on slide 31, also another, in addition, moreover, not only, but also. These are all connective transitions that you use in your writing that you also would use when you present your speech. And then it talks about concluding transitions on slide 32. Therefore, thus, as a result, finally, in conclusion, and to summarize. So you already have these skills and tools and transition knowledge in your back pocket from your writing in college. Now you're going to use it for the stuff that you do for your speech outlines. So it also talks about signposts, first, second, third. This is slide 33. Argument 1, argument 2, argument 3. Main point 1, main point 2, main point 3. My first reason is this. My second reason is this. My conclusion is this. And then to kind of sum it all up, above all, remember this is what I wanted you to walk away from when I leave and I conclude my speech. So that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover. The only thing on slide 38, which you'll hear me talk about this again in other lectures for this class, that when you present your work, especially in the third and fourth speeches and the informative and persuasive speeches, you have to have academic sources. So when you're speaking, you have to be able to cite those sources. So you're going to find those sources on your outline. I'm going to teach you how to cite those sources on your slide. And then I'm going to teach you how to say it correctly. And this is kind of the start of that. So on the bottom of slide 38 in chapter 5, it talks about one author and an in-text citation. So it says, according to Smith's article in the November issue, ... And this is the way that you would introduce something that you would actually cite your source in your speech. It's called informal citation. So you'll learn a little bit more about that as we go on. And for those that you don't know me, if I've had you in class before, you may know this. I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. I love LeBron too, but I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan, a girl from the 80s and 90s, love basketball. So I have a outline on there and slides that talk about Michael Jordan's career to give you an example of what you could do for an informative speech and informative speech slide. So when you're thinking about that third speech, you can do it on anything. You can do it on a location, a person, a place, any noun, person, place, or thing for your informative speech. But you'll see in my outline and on my slides, the evidence, even though I know him very well in a lot of the research and following him his whole career, I don't personally know him, I wish I did, that I cited the sources throughout. So like in the informative speech outline, you'll see I talked about his college career, his NBA career, and then his major accomplishments. In the college main point 1, I cited something from North Carolina. In main point 2, which was about the NBA, I cited things from Sports Illustrated. And in main point 3, I'm not exactly sure if it was Sports Illustrated or the New York Times, but I cited stuff about the Dream Team and him winning the gold in the Olympics for the United States. So you'll see those examples. I have examples all kind of planned out for you, so you'll understand how to cite correctly. Okay, so I think that's it. You definitely have to create a resource page, either a reference or a source page or a works cited page. Again, if it's MLA, it'll be works cited. If it's APA, it'll be references. And you do whatever you'd like to do in terms of what you're comfortable with. But you definitely are going to need a source page for your last 2 speeches. If you use sources for your first and second speech, then you would, have source pages as well. And I can help you with that when we get to that point. Okay, so that concludes chapters 3 and 5. And I'll be back to share, I believe the next chapters are 7 and 10. Thanks.